evening. Wherever you are in the world, welcome to Radio Works. Um, this is forever, your forever young host, Kim, and I would like to welcome you to this evening's show. Yesterday was talking about the science of aging and some of the causes of the science of aging, and today I'm going to be talking about lifestyle. Now, the reason I'm talking about these things with you is that it's part of the process that I'm going through in writing my next book in my Forever Young series, Forever Young, the Advanced Guide to Anti-Aging. And today what I'd like to talk to you about, as I said, is lifestyle. Now, people might wonder what lifestyle's got to do with anti-aging, or they might think it's very obvious what it's got to do with anti-aging. But whichever way it is, whether they think it's obvious or whether they wonder why I'm not just telling them to put some products on their skin, the truth is that our lifestyle has a huge impact on our anti-aging process, or on our aging process. According to research, it's shown that only approximately 8 to 10% of the way we age is to do with our genes, and almost everything else is something that we can actually have an impact on, something we can actually take control of on some level or another. And our lifestyle is one of the biggest contributors to that. So the biggest issue for people in their lifestyle today, which has the most impact on our skin health and how we age, is unfortunately stress. Now, we probably only have a limited amount of control over the amount of stress in our lives. We may have stress from something at work to do with the job itself, or the number of hours we have to do, or even something like driving from place to place if we have a job where it involves a lot of travel. And that's the kind of thing we have probably very little control over. There are also things in our lives at home where we may have stress, and maybe looking after people like young children or sick relatives, something like that, which is stressful in its own right, or have a health condition which is stressful in its own right. And again, there's very little that we can really do to impact the amount of stress we have from those factors. But one thing we can try to have an influence over, which really does help stress and relieve our minds a little, make us feel better in ourselves, is to make sure that we spend time doing things that we love, spend time with people that we love, try new things regularly, and to do stuff for yourself. Make sure that you always do things that are important to you, because quite often, and I've particularly found that in my own life as a mum, when my children were small, I would very, very often come to the bottom of the to-do list, and actually that's okay short term. When we've got tiny babies, it's very important that they take over and that we're not list really, but that needs to only be very short term. In the long term, it's very important to make time for ourselves, because otherwise everything becomes quite overwhelming. And one of the biggest ways that I've found of helping make sure that I shoehorn those things into my life is to do goal setting. And I use a particular form of goal setting, which I will be talking about later in the book. It's not the subject of today's chapter, but I will refer from the chapter to the goal setting part of the book when I write it. So the other thing that I found recently is that hugs are very important for us, and apparently we need 12 hugs a day for growth. And I'm sure that if anybody's been away from loved ones, they know that they feel deprived. Quite often we're touch deprived, and if you don't have anybody to hug you for some reason, if you're away from people that you care about and don't have them to hug you, or maybe you don't have a partner or family at the time, then actually going and having some kind of touch therapy, some kind of massage, or maybe reflexology if you're a bit more concerned and don't like to actually have a body massage. But even if you go and have your hair cut and the hairdresser massages your scalp, any of these things will give you some of the benefit of that touching, which is really important to us as people, because we're social beings, and we are used to being with other people and having that kind of touch. And even if it's just a touch on the hand, things like that, we're used to that. We're programmed to have that. So if we don't have it in our lives, it can be quite stressful. Other things we can do to prevent stress or to relieve stress, or at least reduce it, are to see if there are mechanisms we can put in at work. Maybe if we could reduce the day at work, or perhaps change to a less stressful job if things are really very, very bad. But there are lots of books about stress out there if it's a particular problem for you. My job here is just to say that actually the issue with stress and your skin will mean that you age much more quickly. It increases the rate of aging because it increases free radical damage, which I will be talking about too. The problem with our lifestyle and the impact that various things we do have on our lifestyle is that it creates free radicals. Now, free radicals are kind of particles that get into our bodies through one means or another. Some of them are made within our bodies through our body's natural processes. For instance, as we respire, as our cells respire and take in oxygen, that actually produces free radicals in its own right. Oxygen, if you can imagine, oxygen, when things are oxygenated or oxidized, such as when iron becomes oxidized, it gets rust on it. And that's because of this sort of damage. It's the same kind of damage that happens to our skin, to our cells. One of the things we can do to combat free radical damage is to introduce antioxidants, and that's why they're so important. And that's why people talk about superfoods having lots of antioxidants in. And what they do is, instead of allowing those free radicals to come and take the bits from their cells to make themselves feel whole, antioxidants are very good at donating the sorry. I should have said that the cells or the particles that are created with the free radicals are ionized, and our cells donate ions, or they come and take ions from our cells to make themselves whole. And the free when we have the antioxidants, they give those ions to the free radicals, so they don't have to come into our cells and get them, so that all of the other stuff that's already going on in our body doesn't add to the impact, if you like, of the free radicals. So the next big issue in terms of our lifestyle is whether we spend a lot of time out of doors. There are several issues out of doors, the biggest one being sun damage. I did talk about this previously in my last chapter about how the melanin forms a cap over our nucleus so that it's protected from that free radical damage. So the sun is obviously more prevalent and more of a problem if we're outside a lot. So if we have a job where we spend a lot of time outside, or if, like me, I go walking and running quite a lot in the countryside near where I live, or if you maybe have a hobby such as, I don't know, riding bicycles or horses or going fishing, whatever, and that you spend a lot of time outdoors because of your hobby. So there's those things, or if you work outside, so people that are working in the streets constantly will also have a lot more impact from the sun. Secondly, in terms of why outdoors is more of a problem for us, is pollution. Obviously, if you live outside and work outside, you're a farmer in the countryside, pollution isn't going to be a massive problem. But if you work in central London and you spend a lot of time outside, pollution is going to be a big factor for you. And as I said, pollution also creates this free radical damage. Something else that doesn't cause free radical damage, but actually we can feel it having an effect on our skin, is the weather. So if it's very cold, or if it's very windy, or very hot, or very dry, or even when it's very humid, our skin can react in various different ways. It might get very, very dry and quite tight, or for instance, when it's humid, we might find that we get extra oily. So those things can also be impacted by an outdoorsy kind of lifestyle, which is, I'd say, probably more where I sit on the scale. The third lifestyle thing is if we are constantly inside and don't get to go outside at all. Lack of sun can have an impact on our body because we can't create enough vitamin D. And vitamin D is obviously it's important for our bones. I think most people know that, but it is actually really important for our skin as well. It doesn't matter if you're wearing some sun lotion, you will still form some vitamin D. So just being outside in the sun is good in terms of producing some vitamin C. We take it in much better in that form than trying to eat enough. The other thing with the sun, and if you're working inside constantly, is that it can have an effect on us called SAD, which is seasonal affective disorder, which quite a lot of people have an issue with, particularly in winter. And to kind of combat that, it's really good for us to go outside. And even if you only go out for a few minutes a day, just make sure that you look at a patch of blue sky if you can see one up there, because it really helps to lift our spirit and create endorphins and make us feel a lot better. Another issue with indoors people that don't get to go out a lot, people who are working maybe stuck in an office 9 hours a day, is that quite often they are either centrally heated or they have air conditioning, or possibly both. And both air conditioning and central heating are very, very drying to the air. They take away all of the moisture, and this can leave our skin feeling really quite dull and dry. And the trouble with dull, dry skin is that the cell turnover isn't happening as effectively as it should. And if we're not taking the cells off of the top of our skins can cause all kinds of further problems. So it can create conditions under which we may get spots, or it can, if in extremes, we might get quite dry, cracked skin, and it can become flaky and really uncomfortable. So if you're working somewhere where it's constantly quite dry, it might be worth finding out if there's the possibility of having a humidifier, or maybe just hanging a damp flannel on the radiator nearby where you are, just to put a bit of moisture in the air. If you're going to do the damp flannel trick, make sure that you use a clean flannel, and you could put a bit of aromatherapy oil on it, or you know, something nice smelling, just to freshen it a bit, make it smell nice in your office. The next thing that I would like to talk about is habits. Now, we all have habits, good habits and bad habits. And one of my good habits is to go and exercise. Yay! Although I've not been very good at it lately. But generally speaking, I exercise at least 3 or 4 times a week. And sometimes I'll walk, sometimes I'll run, and sometimes I go to the gym. And that's very good because it helps to pump the blood around my body. And in pumping the blood around my body, it takes all of the nutrients, oxygen and water to my cells to make them nice and healthy. Now, the trouble with exercise is, if you do stupid things like I did earlier this year and go and run a marathon, then you're doing what we call quite heavy exercise. Although the way I did it, some people might argue that it wasn't particularly heavy, but the continued endurance of it means that you use up a lot of the antioxidants that you've got in your body. And once those antioxidants are used up, which generally takes about half an hour, then our bodies are producing free radicals. And when we're exercising, those free radicals are being produced more rapidly because we're burning more oxygen, we're using more oxygen. And you can tell that because we're breathing more heavily. And so, added to the fact that we're producing more more free radicals, and we have got no antioxidants flying around sopping up the free radicals and making them safe, that causes more free radical damage. So in order to combat that, people and myself would recommend making sure that you have a good number of antioxidants in some kind of form or another immediately after you exercise. So I saw a show about it, and they suggested having some watercress, because watercress is beautifully full of antioxidants. For me personally, though, I think I'd rather have some berries or something a bit more pleasant to eat after I've been through my run. A handful of watercress isn't so appealing. Next, there are the maybe not so good habits that some of us have. So, smoking. I'm sorry to say, guys, I have no things to tell you that are redeeming features of smoking. Perhaps it helps you de-stress. That may be the one tiny light at the end. No, it's not. Just go and get yourself some other way of de-stressing, because smoking actually creates vast numbers of free radicals. It ages our skin at a rate that nothing else does. They did some research about smoking, and the people aged 40 in the trial that were smokers had the same age appearance on their skin as people of 60 years old. So actually, it has no redeeming features, and not only does it take the nutrients away from your skin, reduce cell turnover, dry the skin out, leave it looking sallow and yellow and dull, but it also creates massive amount of wrinkling. So if you look at somebody who smokes, they've quite often got quite a lot of wrinkles around their mouths where they've puckered to smoke for years and years and years. And they also quite often have a lot of blackheads on their face, or comedones, and this is caused because of the slow cell turnover. So yeah, horrible for your skin. Please, if you can possibly do it, try and give up. Drinking. This one, not so bad for your skin, not brilliant. It's a bit dehydrating. It does create some free radicals. It's not fantastic for your skin, but in moderation, it's not going to create vast problems for you. So just make sure it is moderation. Next, other things that people might drink are coffee, and this is definitely something I drink quite a lot of myself. I did quite a lot of research into coffee because it is quite controversial. A lot of people don't think it's very healthy for you, and it does have a dehydrating effect. But the studies that I read suggested that although the caffeine has a dehydrating effect, there's sufficient amounts of fluid to combat that somewhat. And providing we're not having more than 4 cups of coffee a day, which would give us a lot of stimulant, then it's not going to cause us too much of an issue. So try to moderate the amount of coffee we drink, and it shouldn't be an issue. Next, sunbathing. Now, sunbathing has a couple of redeeming features. Firstly, it gives us a feeling of well-being, and secondly, it helps us produce that little bit of vitamin D. Unfortunately, it does create huge amounts of free radical damage, and it leaves us with pigmentation. It can create dryness. It creates wrinkles, has almost every bad effect you can think of on your skin, and actually can also cause skin cancer. So although it does have a couple of redeeming features, if you're going to be out in the sun, I suggest you use very high quality amounts of, high quality SPF in good amounts. And this means that you need to be wearing at least factor 30 all of the time. And probably if you're going to sit on the beach for a while, factor 50 is a better option. Now, a few years ago when I wrote my first book, they could only guarantee up to factor 30 would have as good effect as it was intended to. But research has moved on and things have moved on, and now actually sunscreens are better and better than they were. So it is worth investing in a factor 50. They're not any more money than factor 15 as far as I can tell. And now some of our products that we actually use day to day, such as our moisturizers and even makeup to some extent, also have quite high factors of SPF in as well, which also a few years ago wouldn't have been sufficient to give good enough coverage, but now actually offer quite good coverage. So now quite often if we're just going out on a normal day and we're going to be going to work on the train and we're going to have short walks at lunchtime and from to and from work, probably the SPFs in our products are going to be enough, and we don't really have to think about them heavily. The one thing we do have to do though is reapply them, and different amounts of sun protection factor need to be used according to what we're doing. So if we're sunbathing on the beach, you need to be reapplying it regularly at anything between 2 and 4 hour intervals. If we're going to be, as I say, going to and from the office, you may just need to pop on a little bit extra when we're going outside and not worry about it if it's dark. If it's in our products that we're using every day, this isn't going to be such an issue for us. We might just have to remember to do a little top up at lunchtime, something like that. I would never suggest sunbathing for long amounts of time, no matter what kind of SPFs we're wearing, because they can only have so much of an effect. If you are going to be sitting out in the sun, I strongly recommend wearing a wide-brimmed hat, because this covers our faces and to some extent our neck and down our décolletage, so it's likely to keep that area a lot safer, because that's the main area that we're going to see our aging. And finally, a habit, or possibly not a habit, but possibly something that just we're stuck with, is that a lot of us don't sleep enough. It may be that we're in a habit of sitting up playing games at night, or reading books until late, or listening to the radio or the TV until quite late at night. But if we're struggling with having enough sleep, then it's quite important to, and so sleep hygiene is worth looking into. Basically, I'm just going to give you the bare bones of it now, but that you can find out a lot more about it online, and also in books, and somewhere tucked away there's probably a podcast of me talking about it, or there will be, because that was one of the radio shows I'm going to be doing. And the general important factors to think about with sleep hygiene are to have a good routine, to make sure that we go to bed at similar times, to get up and at the same time as well, not just go to bed at the same time, but to try to make sure we get up at roughly the same time every day, to have a good going to bed routine, so our body knows that we're off to bed now. So if you're struggling to sleep, then maybe it's worth saying, right, every night before bed, I'm going to go up, I'm going to have a nice pleasant bath with a bit of bubble bath in it, maybe a scented candle. I'm going to get into my pajamas, and then I'm going to sit down for half an hour and read a book, and then I'm going to go up to bed by whatever time you've decided. So you've settled yourself into a nice, calm, relaxed state where you're comfortable. It's important to make sure that the room is at a good temperature, so you're not too hot or too cold, and particularly our hands and feet can be affected by that. And also, it's very important that we don't have electronic equipment in our room if we're not good at sleeping. Now, if you just drop off every night and think, well, I don't really want to take my TV out of my room, it's the only place I can go and watch it when the kids are watching their thing, that's not a problem. But if you're struggling to go to sleep, it's probably worth taking the electronic equipment away from your room, because they can set a kind of vibration in the air, a kind of noise that we don't actually physically notice is there, but our bodies are attuned to and know are there. Also, if we're the kind of people that are constantly checking our smartphone for texts or updates, then I'd suggest not maybe turning it off, because otherwise perhaps you get 50,000 emails coming through in one go, but just leaving it in your handbag or on the table somewhere where you know where it is, but it's not in your room and you're not going to be bothered by it until morning. Because if it's there, even if you've turned the sound off, you instinctively know it's burbling. And finally, if you're struggling to sleep, then you could invest in something like a one of these pillows that helps you go to sleep. So some of them have some lavender in, some of them have oats in, both of which have soporific qualities, which are really good for helping you settle down and just be calm and drift off. So that's enough from me on sleep for now. I've already talked about relaxation, but that is what I was trying to get to when I was saying make sure that you do stuff you love and all of that. I'd also suggest that actually doing exercise is really important to help us relax and to help us sleep. So although I said avoid the free radicals from the exercise, I'm also going to say definitely put some exercise into your lifestyle, because that helps us with all of those other factors we've got going on. So that's enough for lifestyle from me. And tomorrow I'm going to talk about activity. So that's where I'm going with the exercise, and we're going to think about the kinds of exercise we might want to do and what we like and all of those things. So that's it from me for tonight. And I hope you're enjoying me working through my process of creating my next book. Some of this will end up probably in slightly different chapters than where I'm putting it currently, as I think of new things, or if I think they fit better somewhere else. So what you're hearing is a process. It's not the exact chapters. It's not going to turn into an audio book per se. But I'm very much enjoying it, and I'm very grateful to Marina for allowing me to do that. So I thank you, and hopefully you will be able to tune in again tomorrow evening. If you missed yesterday's show, then there is a recording of it that you can find and listen to. So, good night, wherever you are in the world. Enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening, and I'll speak to you again soon.